Hello, everybody. I am super excited to be here with my guest today, Darryl Edwards, who is the founder of Primal Play and the author of 3 books, Animal Moves, Fitness Paleo or Paleo Fitness, and the A to Z of Paleo. Darryl, thank you so much for coming on today. It really is a pleasure to have you here. I saw you speak on Sunday. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be invited as a guest, so thank you.
My pleasure as well. So on Sunday, I attended an event, a meetup in London, which, by the way, if you're in London, you should totally go to this. It's the London Biohackers and Health Optimization Meetup. And Darryl was talking there. He did his talk there on movement medicine. And it was brilliant. I was there taking notes the entire time. I was blown away by his energy, his knowledge, the results he's getting for people. And I just knew I just had to interview him. So I'm honored to have you here, Darryl. Darryl, can we start with your story? I'd love to understand more about what got you into this, because I find everyone in the health and fitness or healing or wellness niche, most people tend to have their own stories. And you did touch on this a little bit during your talk on Sunday. And I'd love you to just give a little bit more of a background on that. What got you into all this?
Yeah, so my background was actually in technology, working within investment banking. So I had a very successful and lucrative career. I actually worked for Microsoft back in the 90s when they were the big tech organization, ruling the world. So I had a fantastic background in technology. I then got headhunted to work into investment banking when they were investing in technology to give them a competitive advantage. And as you can imagine, hours were very, very long. 16 hours, 18 hours a day were not unusual. 7 days a week, permanently on call. And I didn't complain about it because I was getting paid shed loads of cash. So I welcomed working more hours. I wasn't too concerned about the impact on my social life. I was like, I just want to earn as much money as I can. And I really enjoyed the work. And I enjoyed the hustle and bustle of that environment. There are a few downsides when on having an annual health check, being told that I was suffering with type 2 diabetes, early signs of heart disease based on my kind of lipid profile, so increased risk of heart disease, I should say, and also hypertension, very high blood pressure. I was anemic. I'd been suffering with chronic low back pain. That was an ongoing concern, in addition to all of the above. And the recommendation by my doctor was a cocktail of meds. So beta blockers for my blood pressure, what else was I recommended? Statins, so to manage my cholesterol.
Type 2 meds, metformin?
Metformin for my type 2 diabetes. Diazepam for my back pain. Pethidine, which I think is an elephant tranquilizer, used to be given to pregnant women during labor. So I mean, really powerful pain relief for my back pain. And the concern I had was, well, okay, one, what are the side effects of taking all of those meds? And secondly, what if I don't take them? That's another question. What would happen? And thirdly, how long for? So the first were, of course, there's a multitude of side effects. Taking any medicine, any drug has side effects. Secondly, it was going to be something I'd have to take for the rest of my life. And thirdly, if I didn't take those meds, there was just a significant increase in risk of me dying within the next 10 years. That's how it was. That was the kind of how it was sold to me as a reason for me to change, not to change my lifestyle, but to start taking these meds. When I asked about lifestyle, if there's anything else that I could do, there were no real answers given. But there was one thing that I do remember reading at some point, was that exercise was a great way to manage hypertension, to manage blood pressure, that it can reduce blood pressure the more active you are. And I also remember having some vague recollection of exercise being pretty good at managing blood sugars, blood glucose. So I was like, I'm very sedentary. I'm literally sitting down all day. I break to go to the toilet. If I could have had a toilet, at my desk, So I wouldn't be distracted from work. I probably would have done. So that was the environment that I was in, cocooned by lots of screens. Would go home and then would continue to work often all night. So I was very sedentary. I decided to prioritize becoming more active. I signed up for a gym. I started a regular exercise program, and within a short space of time, literally within weeks, there were improvements in my blood test. So I had a blood test done at 30 days, a repeat of those tests, and there was significant improvement across the board. And my doctor was like, "Okay, what are you doing? Continue to do, but we'll keep a close eye on you." And after about a couple of months, pretty much everything normalized. Blood pressure became optimal. I had normal fasting blood glucose. My A1C had normalized. Everything was looking good. In terms of my back pain, that was a longer term journey in terms of looking at how I could resolve that. But in terms of the immediate dangers, the fact that I no longer had to take those meds, or I didn't even want to take them in the first place. So the fact that I didn't have to start taking those meds, and I saw a difference in my well-being within a matter of weeks, I was kind of sold. I became an evangelist for exercise, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. But I also had I also wanted to be sure that this was going to be have long-term impact, not just a flash in the pan. So fast forward several years on, I continued to exercise. I continued to start thinking much more about my health in other areas. So exercise was the gateway for me to start looking at things like, what am I going to eat now that I'm exercising? I want to fuel my activity. What about the fact that I'm hardly sleeping and I'm pretty much an insomniac because of the hours that I'm doing, the stress that I'm constantly under, and how can I actually help others who are interested in following a similar path to me? So I stayed within banking for several years. I decided to learn a lot more about health and well-being. And then I decided it was time for me to leave that industry and to work within health and well-being full-time. And that's what I did in around 2010 or so. I left banking. I initially decided I wanted to focus probably much more on nutrition initially, but then recognized that I wasn't passionate about nutrition. I knew it was useful. I knew it was part of my health progress, but it wasn't something that I would jump out of bed and be really excited about. Movement was what I was excited about. Movement was what started my journey, and movement was what I was passionate about. So that became, my exploration of movement and fitness is why I'm known as the fitness explorer, because I started thinking about, okay, what can I actually become more curious about? What can I see that will work for me, and that I can be most fascinated about? There was a few roadblocks on that journey. One, of course, giving up a very lucrative career, not making any money for a very long time, and realizing that passion wasn't enough. I had to start thinking about how I was actually going to make a living from this. And secondly, recognizing that I was starting to fall out of love with exercise. I was no longer enjoying what I was doing. I started skipping gym sessions. I started to prefer sitting on my armchair and watching, box sets than to do my programs. I was going to the gym and getting injured on a regular basis, and then taking lots of time out. So there was that honeymoon period that I had for probably a couple of years just started to dissipate, it was like, I don't really enjoy this anymore. Why am I not enjoying this? I've had really good results. I'm healthier, I'm stronger, I'm fitter than I've ever been in my adult life. What's the problem? And so the problem for me was the fact that I was only enjoying the end result. I was taking that highly stressed environment from the previous workplace into the gym. I was beating myself up. I was highly competitive, and I only wanted to feel great about myself if I was number one on the leaderboard. And I recognized I wouldn't be able to maintain that until the end of my days. let alone, continue my gym membership into the end of that year. So that's how I started thinking about the joy of movement and what fascinated me about movement in the first place, when it was kind of all new, all exciting. How could I maintain that excitement? And the last time I had that, and I recall having that, was when I was a kid. So being a kid, growing up in the 70s, we were all active. Everyone around me was an active kid. And you spent a lot of time outside playing games, climbing trees, like getting up to mischief. That's what life was about. And so movement wasn't about exercise. It was just about being playful, having fun with your friends, and pretty much saying, I would love to stay out here all day, all night if I could, to play. That would have been the ideal scenario. Mom, don't call me inside to have dinner. I want to continue to play. Sun, don't go down, because it'd be great to continue to play for hours and hours and hours. So that's what I wanted to recapture as an adult. That's what I realized. I was more passionate about movement in its fundamental form than exercise. And I recognized that exercise was just a proxy, a substitute for the lack of physical activity we would have got ancestrally. There was a time where I couldn't work in an office and be sedentary on a chair all day. I would have had to have been working probably outdoors, farming, manual labor was what we had to do, or to hunt and gather food. Movement was key, pivotal to our survival, day-to-day survival. Now in the 21st century, there is no requirement in many respects to move in a way that enables us to survive, to live. So once I recognized that was the real reason for movement, that's the importance of movement, that's what underlies and underpins the decisions that we would have made to be able to survive, was forged through movement. I need to recapture some of that and increase the importance level of movement, but I also want to make it fun. Because if I no longer have the driver to move because it's essential, it's now an optional, then fun is a way of making that something which becomes more likely to be mandatory. If I'm having fun, if I'm seeking fun, if I'm seeking joy, I'm more likely to say joy is more important to me than just lounging on the armchair.
Yeah,
so
totally.
So I've kind of given you pretty much the backstory, the transformation, which was a health one, right through to the transformation, which was much more about a change in mindset.
Yes.
And now Primal Play being what I do, and what I teach as a movement coach.
Incredible. First of all, congratulations for reversing those conditions through movement and exercise, which is just incredible. It really shows that the number one fuel for our cells is oxygen, really. And many of us aren't getting enough of it around our body. And just like you're saying, you lived a pretty sedentary lifestyle. So it's almost not so surprising that you were suffering from those conditions in a way, and you managed to reverse them through movement. And the fact that I wanted to ask this question, but you answered it. You talk about movement instead of exercise. And with a lot of people, exercise can often have a negative connotation. It's almost like a chore that you just have to do something. Oh, I've got to go to the gym. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. And rather than it being fun. And that's what I love about what you're doing. You're making movement fun and bringing back how we are, the primal part of us, hence Primal Play, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
And there's one thing you said on Sunday. It was about becoming more human, because we can go to the gym for an hour and run on a treadmill for half an hour and do some weights and stuff. And it just becomes something that we just do again and again and again. It's kind of not natural in a way. I like to mix things up. I like to do a bit of running. I like to do a bit of some sprints. I like to lift in the gym. I like to do some yoga. And I think there's still some variety to be had. Yeah, I think there's still not much play here. And I've actually got your book, your Animal Moves here.
So great. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So that proves that someone's actually bought a copy of the book. So I appreciate that. It's really fascinating how in the 21st century exercise, it's so important. It's people are constantly talking about this. We have great access to gyms. There's more gyms than ever before. There are more magazines about fitness than ever before. There are now, you go back probably 20 years even, there were one or two fitness magazines, probably men's health. There wasn't even a woman's health probably back 20, 25 years ago. It was men's health. Now you've got a whole subset of different magazines, cycling, running, cross train. I mean, there's a bunch of information out there, lots of media, online, programs dedicated to movement. Of course, there's so much extensive sports coverage, so we can spectate and watch people move as well. So, exercise is something that we talk a lot about. We definitely spectate in terms of watching sport, but not many of us are actually doing it. And if we are doing it, most of us begrudge it. We would rather use that time for something else. But most of us recognize that, hey, it can keep us in shape. It can help us manage, a stressful lifestyle. It can help us maintain health. Some of us buy into that message. Like, if you exercise, you can reduce the likelihood of you dying prematurely. That sounds good to me. If I exercise, I can live a longer and healthier life. Boom, I'm sold. I can maintain function. Well, this all sounds great. I better start an exercise program, right? But when something is so difficult or perceived to be difficult to do, and when it's very difficult to outsource it. So in other words, if I want to improve my diet, and I know exactly what type of diet I want to follow, I've already read up what I need to. I listen to a podcast, I buy a book. I'm like, hey, yep, this is what I need to do. And I have the means. I can say, I can't be bothered to cook, but it's fine. I can order the exact food that I want on a daily basis. I can afford to do so. Click a button, the food arrives. Oh my goodness, I can't prepare it. Oh, don't worry about it. You can have meals prepared for you already. You just need to heat it up. And if you still can't do that, and you could afford to get somebody to do it for you, then you could even do that. You could literally sit down, order food, get somebody to prepare it, get somebody to cook it, get somebody to hand it to you, right? Exercise, unfortunately, you have to do the work. Right? Totally. You have to actually perform the movement patterns that you're told are beneficial for you. And even if we're sold shortcuts, even if we're told, hey, you can reduce the time by doing high intensity interval training, but unfortunately, you reduce the time, but you actually have to work harder during that time, which means it even feels like even more of a chore. It's even more punishing. There are no shortcuts, unfortunately, when it comes to exercise. You hire a personal trainer, they can't do the work for you. You've got to do it yourself. So exercise is already on its back foot in comparison to some of the other lifestyle interventions that we can latch onto to improve our health. So that's the first problem. And secondly, we're designed to conserve energy. We're hardwired for convenience. So if I can go from A to B walking versus A to B using public transport, or even better, C using my own transport, most people would elect C, regardless of the distance. Most journeys, remarkably, that's not most journeys. Let me rephrase that. About 25% of car journeys are around a mile long in distance.
That's insane.
Which is insane. And it's about a 15-20 minute walk, and most of us would decide, no, I'd rather take the car. And as well as it being 25% of car journeys, they're also the most polluting. Going that sort of distance, you're causing the most problems in terms of car pollution. So there's a huge problem, not just for us in terms of our health, but also the health of our children who are suffering from the pollution that comes from those type of journeys, and also the planet obviously suffers from that pollution. So there are many reasons why we need to reevaluate our reliance on machines to provide locomotion for us, our reliance on technology to make life easier for ourselves, and our reliance on believing that it's not that important. The other things that we can do, we've all heard that you can't outrun a poor diet or a bad diet. I'm sure we've all heard that, that kind of seen that meme. But equally so, and probably more fundamentally so, is you can't, healthily eat your way out of a sedentary lifestyle. You cannot maintain any form of good health just by eating a perfect diet, but sitting down all day, not moving. In the first instance, you're not getting the best of the nutrition you're taking on board. That's the first, in the first instance. Your body requires that energy to replenish itself, to repair itself, to make the best of the resources that you're taking on board. If you're not moving, your body will very, very quickly decide, I'll reject what isn't necessary. A lot of this is just wasteful. I don't need this. I don't need to repair my bone. My muscle tissue is wasting away. I'm fine. I'm happy with that. That's the first thing. Even things like motility through the gut.
That's what I was about to ask you. Yeah. And so, vitamin D from that. Yeah. Crazy.
It improves motility in the gut. It improves the ability for food to move past through the digestive system and to maximize nutrient absorption, which is also a superb benefit of that. And of course, if you're moving outside, which I touched upon on Sunday, movement outdoors has a significant additional benefit to movement itself. So if I run on a treadmill, running at 5 miles an hour, say, and I run outside at 5 miles an hour, both running for, say, 40 minutes, a 40-minute run. Just being outside, and let's take the summer. So if it's the summer, you're going to have access to vitamin D. Okay, spring, summer into early autumn, you're going to have access to vitamin D. So that gives you all of the benefits, of course, of having vitamin D exposure, improving your immune system, and the like. Okay, but you also have additional benefits from things like increased wind resistance. So your heart and lungs are working harder as you're running against the wind by being outdoors than being on a treadmill. Also, the terrain, the fact that your body has to navigate the terrain in a way that it's almost unknown until you're in that environment, because of that. Whereas on a treadmill, it's pretty much exactly the same cadence throughout your run. That difference means your body's working harder. Your musculoskeletal system is working harder to maintain your ability to continue to run outdoors than inside. And additionally, you actually burn more calories. One reason is because of the thermoregulation, body trying to maintain its temperature. So whether it's hot outside or cold outside, your body wants to maintain a body temperature which helps you to live, right? So by doing that, you're burning a lot of calories to ensure that you're at the right sort of temperature, whether you're sweating or whether you're trying to boost your body, your core temperature. So those are just a few of the benefits of being outdoors, which are physical. But there's probably one more I should mention, which is the benefit of just being out in nature itself. So just running or moving in nature and having the visibility of the color green, the natural color of green, reduces blood pressure. It boosts the immune system response. So it improves immunomodulation, which is also a significant benefit. Just looking at nature does that alone. And if you actually interact with nature, so something called biophilia, which is a human's innate ability to love nature, a fascination with nature. So by climbing trees, for example, by crawling in the grass, by actually getting kind of down and dirty almost with nature when it comes to movement, also has significant benefits for children as well as adults. So that encourages biodiversity for us, having access to soil-based organisms,
Incredible.
for example.
Yeah.
So our micro biodiversity can also improve based on what we're accessing outside in nature.
That's incredible.
There's a whole kind of smorgasbord of benefits which many of us are just not aware of, because for us, exercise is just about, okay, I want to get into shape, or okay, I want to be able to run a 5K, you know, or I know there's maybe some benefits to health, but I'm not really sure why, but I don't really care. Actually, a lot of the things that we rely on other mechanisms to improve our health, movement actually facilitates a lot of those.
That's incredible. I think the last thing you just said really resonated with me on Sunday as well. And that's how it improves our microbiome, the gut bacteria. I think you said the diversity by 20% or something, which is massive.
Yes.
Given that the gut is like the focal point for any kind of common illness or chronic disease, that's the focal point where we need to heal. Yes. I didn't know that exercise had that amount of impact on your gut health and the biodiversity of your microbiome. That's incredible.
Yeah. So you know, for me, I've always been challenged by, I suppose, once I became more passionate about movement and was interested in the underlying science and how our physiology benefits from movement. You know, you're often challenged by nutritionists who will say, or or social media which will say, health is 80% diet, 20% exercise, or food is medicine, and it's the most important thing you can do is improve your diet, because it can do all of these things, and all disease begins in the gut. So if you're not eating well, then hey, there's a problem, and 95% or 85% of serotonin resides in the gut. So mental health is all about the gut and all about how it's fed. And most of the gut is actually not human cells. It's foreign invaders that live within us. Some are beneficial, some are not. And if there's an imbalance, there's a problem. Okay, unless the imbalance is more good than bad, right?
Yeah.
If there's lots of pathogenic bacteria in our gut, then it can affect us detrimentally. So I'm like, yeah, this all makes sense. Drink, kombucha and take probiotics and kimchi, and there's all these things you can do to improve microbial diversity. Sold. Until you recognize that there's a direct relationship between how fit you are in terms of peak VO2 max, so your ability to take on and process oxygen to fuel your workouts aerobically, and microbiome diversity. So you get more volume of health promoting bacteria, and you get increased diversity of health promoting bacteria, even when you control diet. So the same diet, which is, I mentioned this study on rugby players. So rugby players having a controlled diet, they have a nutritionist, they have chefs, they've got to eat a particular way to maximize performance. They looked at that population and looked at the fitter members of the squad actually had increased microbial diversity, accounting for up to 20% increase. And then they took that research to look at other populations, not just rugby players, because if you think about it, you could say, well, oh yeah, the fitter rugby players are probably the ones that spend more time in the soil, they get dirty, that's possibly also part of that explanation. They get lots of dirt under their fingers when they're playing, access to soil-based organisms. So there are two factors at play, potential explanations. But a third, which is probably more of a gut feel for me, no pun intended, is the fact that most health promoting bacteria in the gut are aerobically, oxygen rich. They like oxygen rich environments, aerobically rich environments. So the fact that your body is in a very highly oxygenated state when you're active, you have high levels of oxygen saturation, far higher than if you're inactive, or if you say a smoker, for example. That's also another explanation as to why that occurs. And the great thing about what I've just said is that's just a small fraction as to what the benefits of movement are in terms of
Oh
our
yeah,
physiology. So it reduces inflammation, chronic inflammation, which is also incredible.
my bag.
You know, it's beneficial for our, for mental health. It reduces the risk of all causes of disease. You know, all cause mortality is what's used in the research. There's up to 50% reduction of all cause mortality if you're active versus someone who's sedentary. Nothing else in the literature gives us that much benefit, or nothing's been proven to give us as much benefit as physical activity. Again, remarkable. And when you think about all cause mortality, it's every single cause of death you can think of. I mean, it isn't just, cancer or heart disease or, or the complications of type 2 diabetes. It's every single complication, chronic health condition you can think of that we can die from prematurely. Being, fitter and healthier through physical activity gives us a significant benefit. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, can I? Yeah,
but yeah.
I'd just love to speak to that because it's such a major point you just made. I've kind of become a little bit obsessed with what cancer is and how it's created in the body and how we can get rid of it naturally. And I've come to the understanding that with epigenetics, we understand about 95% of all illness and disease available to us is actually down to the environment that we keep in our body. And there was the Truth About Cancer Live symposium at the end of 2016, I believe I went to this. There was one or number of people who I call pioneers, people like yourself, pioneering this. And this guy who's helped people reverse the most metastasized of cancers said the number one reason for all chronic disease is the under-oxygenation of cells. And it really makes sense when we look at the human body as this giant cluster of cells, 50-odd trillion cells. If you talk to Bruce Lipton, I think that's the figure he quotes. And every single one of our cells requires different fuels. Number 1, oxygen. Number 2, water. Number 3, nutrients. Number 4, the ability to eliminate waste. So oxygen, obviously, is through movement, and the lymphatic system only really works when we're moving properly.
Yes,
so it's like exercise takes care of 2 of those very, very quickly. Like the 4 primary fuels for our cells. And of course, the oxygenated environment is what creates an alkaline environment in the body. And we all know what happens when we become acidic. It kind of creates a breeding ground for disease to be created in the body. And it just makes so much sense when we kind of take a step back and think, hang on, we're human beings. We're designed to move. The whole musculoskeletal system, the brain, every single organ in the body fuels off movement.
Yes.
Yes. And those statistics that you just talked about make so much sense. To be
honest, I'm sure for some of the listeners, it's going to be preaching to the converted. But for many listeners, a lot of this information is going to be quite enlightening. Like I had no idea. And that was certainly my initial reaction when I started to dig a little bit deeper in the literature and recognize that a lot of this wasn't bleeding edge research. It's many years, decades worth of literature supporting this idea of physical activity being so beneficial for us. But now we're starting to understand at the very lowest levels as to why that is. So one other thing I'd like to mention is the fact that muscle tissue is now being recognized as the largest endocrine organ in the body.
Wow.
Because there are so many hormones being produced, so many cytokines or mitokines more accurately, being produced on muscle tissue and muscle contraction that have healing properties, that have tumor fighting properties, that have insulin sensitivity improving qualities. I mean, pretty much every single major organ in the body has crosstalk between muscle tissue and those organs. So everything from the kidneys, the liver, the heart, the pancreas, every organ. And some of the mechanisms that we rely on. So, for example, the obvious one would be carbohydrate restriction. So, I have a problem managing blood glucose. I have a hyperinsulinic environment. I'm at increased risk of insulin resistance. I'm likelihood of getting type 2 diabetes. So carbohydrate restriction is one very good way at reducing that risk of not becoming symptomatic. But because we are avoiding carbohydrate consumption, we're avoiding insulin being required to bring blood sugar levels down. That's the reason why we do that. But there are other mechanisms to control blood glucose that don't need insulin to do so. And many people are ignorant of this. And many people don't realize there are non-insulin mediated ways of controlling blood glucose. There are glucose transporters that don't need insulin. And that comes through the mechanism of muscular contraction. So it's incredible that for myself, when I think about, when I hear about people saying, I've reversed type 2 diabetes, which is incredible. But what is true reversal? So for me, true reversal would mean that that person had full metabolic flexibility. If they had carbohydrates, their body could handle that without any issue at all. They then become type 2 diabetic, which means if they have carbohydrates, they're in a lot of trouble unless they're on meds or unless they're taking increased insulin. Problematic. And there's all those complications that occur. They restrict carbohydrates, they go on a ketogenic diet or for example, and they no longer have to be concerned about the side effects of type 2 diabetes, the symptoms of that, because they're living a healthier life. The problem is, I wouldn't class that as reversal of type 2 diabetes. I would say that's basically avoiding what is the stimulus that's going to be causing you a problem. If you can get back to complete metabolic flexibility, that to me would be a complete reversal of the disease state. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we do have a mechanism to improve insulin sensitivity, to reduce insulin resistance. And that's exercise, once again, because you don't need to use insulin to reduce blood sugar. You don't need to use as much to do so if you're active, if there's lots of muscle contraction. And given that 85% of our body, the sink for blood glucose is muscle tissue. Most of the demand for elevated blood sugar is to be forced into muscle tissue. If the muscle tissue doesn't require it, then it's floating around and has to be dealt with. Only 10% or so is for the liver to deal with, or demand for it, to replenish glycogen. And about 5% of it is for adipose tissue, fat tissue. So again, it takes a lot for that excess to become something that is utilized as storage in fat cells to then propagate overweight and obesity. Only 5% of the demand.
Crazy.
75 to 85% is muscle tissue. So it's amazing just thinking about that. As soon as you become less sedentary, you're improving insulin sensitivity, which means my body needs to excrete less insulin to get exactly the same response of reduction. That's pretty wonderful and amazing to be aware of that. Secondly, it doesn't always need insulin. So muscle contraction, significant demand for blood glucose, can extract blood sugar from the blood into muscle cells without any insulin, which is also pretty incredible.
Wow.
It concerns me sometimes when people are talking about carbohydrate restriction and carbohydrate intolerance, which of course exists, and of course does a fantastic job. But there's something sitting in the wings that could either make a significant difference in terms of supporting that approach, i.e. exercise of the right type plus carbohydrate restriction, or for those who are looking to actually truly reverse, truly support metabolic flexibility, incorporating more movement. So for myself, who was pre-diabetic, for example, for someone who at that stage, I wasn't even aware of carbohydrate restriction as being beneficial. I just started exercising and that seemed to normalize things. The great thing is now that I do have full metabolic flexibility. I can consume carbohydrates of the quality that I want to without any concerns, and I'm aware that that for me is having that flexibility is probably the best place to be, you know. And as a metaphor, very quickly, it's a bit like saying the only way I can reduce stress is if I go, you know, to the Himalayas, become a monk, you know, listen to Enya in a darkened room and chant, and then I'm now in this really good state. A better place to be would be in the middle of complete and utter mayhem, and that you can maintain a proper response to those external stresses.
Yes,
and that's how I view this. You know, we should be able to operate within these extremes of being able to deal with our external environment. And oftentimes we just feel that, oh, we need to avoid, oh no, just avoid stress because it's oh my gosh, stress is so harmful for us. Actually, acute stress is good, chronic stress is bad, and our ability to work within the confines of the environment is true definition of health and well-being. Anyway, I went on a bit of a rant there, but hopefully that was also useful discussion for you.
Oh, it's incredible. You've hit so many points, and it's really. I've been trying to take notes. I have been taking notes as you've been talking, and I want to kind of address every one of them. But then you've kind of answered them at the same time as well. First, I just want to let's go backwards, because starting with what you just said, the stress thing, that analogy you just gave is brilliant, and it's. You just said acute stress is good, chronic stress is bad. I totally agree with that. And the understanding that we need to be in a place of zen, even in the most kind of quote unquote stressful environments. And that's how you kind of equated the reversal of type 2 diabetes. That's such a brilliant point you made about the reversal of type 2 diabetes, because if you go on the ketogenic diet, you can probably reverse it on the blood work in about 3 weeks. You know, I've helped people reverse it myself as well. And I do always help, encourage people to do the movement part as well. But the idea that we need to, for true reversal, to be metabolically flexible.
Yeah, metabolically flexible. So I would say it's more accurate to say remission.
Yeah.
You can go into long-term or permanent. You can go into permanent remission of type 2 diabetes by managing your diet alone.
Yeah,
and there is significant evidence. You've seen that in your practice. I know many people who've done the same. That is for certain. But I think reversal is we use that word because it has huge impact, but it probably isn't really truthful. And so I think if we were truthful about it, then we would probably start discussing some of the other areas that people could add to their journey that would be beneficial. So for example, sleep quality and sleep hygiene has a significant impact on blood glucose, right?
Yeah.
But if we just tell people, don't worry, if you just go 20 grams of carbs a day, 5 grams of carbs, you're all good, then you're missing out on all of those other benefits that come from more movement, that come from improving quality of sleep. Coffee. So, for example, caffeine decreases insulin sensitivity, for example. So there are people who are on a keto diet, chugging back lots of coffee, not being aware that caffeine can actually reduce the sensitivity of insulin, insulin's ability to do its work. But, they don't need to be concerned about that so much because, hey, I'm getting pretty good readings because I'm avoiding carbs. I don't need carbohydrates. So anything that works is great, for sure. But the more things that we can embrace to get there means we have less single points of failure, right?
Yeah.
If I just rely on one thing, what happens if that no longer works or doesn't work as well as it used to? Whereas if you have this multi-pronged approach, then you're more likely to something else will take the strain, at certain points, what I mean? Like, rather than just relying on one thing that can just break, and then you're just at a loss. So that's probably again, where my approach has changed over the years, where even though I am really passionate about movement, and I recognize there are all of these different pillars of health and well-being that are important, and that if you look across the world's global population, there are people who are eating, very high carbohydrate diets, who are maintaining great health for very great number of years. That those people exist. Great, significant populations of those. So I think you can't just say for all humans carbohydrates are bad. Because we have evidence that, I don't know if you've heard of the Tsimane people, Tsimane. They're a hunter-gatherer tribe in Bolivia, have pretty much have no access to the Western world. They, I think it might have been 2017, 2018, they're recognized as the healthiest cardiometabolic markers of all humans. Lowest risk of diabetes, heart disease, you name it. And they have a 70% carbohydrate intake for their diet. Very, very low fat. Less than 10% fat, 70% carbohydrate, and I think the rest is about 20% protein. So again, it's remarkable. Totally. And you could say, it's a genetic adaptation, perhaps for just that population, but there are populations around the world that seem to do okay. And of course, we know that for them, they just haven't had artificial processed foods, like lots of refined sugar. They've been eating real food from dusk till dawn, from birth till death. That's what's evidence within their lifestyle. They're very active because they've got to be hunting all day and gathering food. So I become more open, I suppose, to recognizing there are so many factors that are important for health and well-being. Totally.
No, I'm totally agreeing with that. The next bit I'd love to talk about is the statistic about what is required or what the guidelines are for being healthy in terms of exercise every day. They talk about 30 minutes a day. What the true requirements are. I'd love to talk about that. You've given a brilliant example about those tsunami people, surviving on a high carb diet and just moving all the time. Another kind of proof that we need to move, and it's our number one life fuel. Oxygen is our number one life fuel. Sedentary lives is killing people. We've heard sitting is the new smoking. And that's been flowing around a lot these days. So can we just kind of bring it back to kind of modern life, how people can go about this in their everyday life, given that we're living in a society where a lot of people are sedentary, going to the office 9 to 5, 8 till 6, whatever it is, sat on a train, sat in cars, sat in traffic. How can people? Okay, two questions. First of all, the statistic about how much the guidelines are telling us that we need to move. Can you just speak to that for a second? Yeah.
So the guidelines for adults, so 18 years to 65, is 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, and which is 150 minutes per week, and 2 days of resistance training. All muscle groups for 2 days a week. So that's the minimum recommendation. If you do less than that, you're pretty much physically inactive, or you're not active enough to promote a baseline of health. For kids under 5 to 17, it's 60 minutes per day, 7 days a week of moderate to vigorous intensity activity. Kids under 5, it's 3 hours a day. Which is probably the most alarming of those stats, because kids just aren't getting that much. And for the very youngest of children, it's pretty much every single time they're awake and they're not feeding. You should be they should be moving. They should be moving. Yeah, they should be moving. Wow. They should be moving around. They should be crawling around. So it's a significant amount of activity. In terms of what's optimal, so the research suggests the best benefit is going from doing less than 30 minutes 5 days a week to doing 30 minutes 5 days a week. That's pretty much the best benefit anyone can get. Going from sedentary to doing 30 minutes 5 days a week is pretty much the best place you can be. Okay. Once you've hit that 30 minutes, optimal health, you're looking at about 150 to 200 minutes. So from 150 minutes per week, going from 150 to about 300 to 450 minutes a week is the kind of sweet spot of optimizing your health. That's what the evidence suggests. Once you start doing even more than that, or much more than that, you can start becoming kind of chronic exercise. You can start having problems with addiction to exercise. You can become chronically inflamed. So there is a point where you can have too much of that medicine. But to be frank, not many people are there. Those you're talking elite athletes, you're talking those who really suffer from just doing too much and getting burnt out. Most of us are sitting well below the bare minimum. So the research tells us about 30% of adults meet the requirement. And that's just for aerobic activity. That's not even including 2 days of resistance training. But when you wear accelerometers, where you wear devices tracking how much you move, the research is about 5% of adults meet that. We're just not moving enough. Yeah. People walk, if I walk from the entrance to my building to my desk, people count that as kind of physical activity, like, oh, I'm active, I'm moving, I walked a bit, I walked for a minute. That's not cutting it, unfortunately. You need a sustained effort of a certain amount, which is going to be working your heart and lungs to qualify.
Yeah. Get your heart rate up.
Get your heart rate up.
Warm up your body. Get you sweating a little bit.
Yeah. You'll be a little bit warmer.
Working.
So most of us, especially if you're quite conditioned or have been in the past, it takes quite a bit for your body to be overcoming that physical stressor. So that's another type of stress. The physical stress that comes from physical activity, which is more difficult than just being idle. Much more difficult than just being idle. So me standing all day is obviously better than me sitting down all day, but it's still not enough to really make the difference. Me walking for long lengthy periods of time is obviously better than me just standing or just sitting, but there are more intensities that our body needs to remain healthy. I need to be lifting more than my body weight. I need to be going at great intensities to vigorous and high intensity activities to promote the best of health. So that's how much we should be doing. Not many of us are doing it, unfortunately, and that is a reality of 21st century life.
Yeah.
In terms of what we can do to overcome that, to make a difference, is one, you have to rely less on a seated position on a chair. That's pretty much it. Just get rid or just avoid the chair as much as possible. So if you're sitting for 8 hours a day at work, ask if you can get a standing desk. If you can't, try to have standing meetings, walking meetings. If you're going to be seeing a colleague, get out of your chair and walk to their desk and have a chat with them instead. Get as many opportunities as you can to get out of your desk, to get out of your chair, away from your desk and out of your chair. You get a phone call, you stand up and take the call, for example. Those are kind of, a few things you can do to reduce the amount of sitting time you have. In terms of what else you can do throughout the day, if you have the ability to have an active commute, give it a go. If you can cycle to work, if you can walk, you live close enough to work to walk, then do so. If you've got really good public transport, like we do in London, for example, I don't necessarily need a car. I can pretty much get wherever I need to, and it means that I have to walk, to my nearest bus stop, to the nearest tube station. I have to walk, and I kind of play games with that idea. So I will pretend sometimes that the first bus stop doesn't exist, so I have to walk to the next one.
Love it.
If I see escalators and the lift, even though I really want to take them, I say, the lift's not working today, so I'm going to have to take the stairs. So I create opportunities to move more. I avoid convenience. So that's the second most important rule. So first, avoid sitting. The second, avoid convenience. And then the third is to find something that you enjoy so that you're more likely to do it. So if dancing's your thing, do it. If you had a skateboard when you were young and you'd love to dust it off and use it, do that. If yoga's your thing, do it, but just recognize that yoga isn't enough. If you're a runner, do that, but recognize that running isn't enough. So being human means we should be engaging in all forms of movement patterns that our ancestors would have undertaken.
And that's
from standing to walking to, yes, exactly, crawling, jumping, climbing. There's all of these movement patterns that we were designed to do. And those are what we need to be engaging in. So if I just lift heavy and that's all I do because I hate cardio, unfortunately, you're not going to be as healthy as you could be because your heart and lungs aren't going to be working hard enough when you're just lifting heavy. It's not sustained effort. So hopefully being specialists, you will see that being a specialist of movement can also be detrimental. We need to be generalists of movement, and that way we're covering all of the bases. That way we're becoming more human.
This is brilliant. So would you say this is how you differentiate yourself from other people in health and fitness? I was going to ask what kind of makes you different. And I think you've really hit every point there. It's about variety, isn't it? It's really about,
it's about variety. It's about paying homage to our ancestry. So Primal Play, the reason I call what I do Primal Play is because I do want to acknowledge our evolutionary biology. I do want to acknowledge how we were designed, how we were created, whatever your belief system is. Whatever got us here, we need to acknowledge what got us here. We need to acknowledge how we became masters of our environment to be able to get to where we are today. And so the movement patterns forged us epigenetically. It was about our interaction with the environment. And that has to be part and parcel as to what I do now. So we have to model and mimic as best as possible what our ancestors did, because that optimizes our gene expression today. And we have to ignore the harmful effects of our environment of the 21st century, like, for example, the fact that I want to sit down in a chair all day. You know, that signal is being constantly hitting my body, and my cells are going, oh yeah, it's nice to rest and relax. You know, so my genes are telling me that's what I should be doing. And this is nature, right? So we have to overcome that signal because it's not one which is beneficial for us. I read something really interesting recently about the importance of the chair. You know, the chair was something that was really only became important with the Industrial Revolution. Chairs weren't a huge part of our lives prior to that. You know, you can see evidence of that in the developing world. You know, you go to Southeast Asia, many people are still squatting, you know, and chatting all day in a squatted position without using a chair. You know, a chair is a Western, you know, modern civilization device that we're becoming even more reliant on.
I've actually, I'll just speak to that in a second. For a moment. I've heard that the chair is the worst invention ever for our backs. And given that our spine is like the hard drive for our body, it's connected to every single organ. And it really is something we need to pay attention to. It's a human frame. And the chair is completely altering our spine. It's throwing it out of shape. People are getting bad backs in their 20s because they're sat down all the time. They'll bend down and pick up a pen and go, oh my God, what's going on? The chair's kind of ruining us. So sitting is the new smoking. The chair is the worst invention ever for our backs. We need to become more primal and we need to start moving again, don't we?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's you know, I mean, I don't want to sound like a Luddite. I don't want to sound as if I want to go back on the savannas of Africa, you know, because I don't. I love using my smartphone. I love the fact that we can have this conversation. But we do, you know, even chairs within my lifetime. There was a time that I could go to the train station. There was no seating. I mean, you know, the seat was on the train. There was no seating. There was no lounge area. There was nothing. Chairs were very rare for you to see a chair outside, right? They're far more commonplace. And not only that, they're becoming much more comfortable, right? As well. You know, they're like you buy a chair, an armchair now, or a sofa. It's almost like a bed, so comfortable. Like, you know, it just kind of, you sink into it. You could just, you know, it's almost like you're getting a massage. And that's how.
Well, you've got them, of course, chairs, and then you've got all the remote, like fixtures and for beers. Everything's it's a Joey chair from Friends. You don't need to actually move.
Yeah, don't need. Yeah,
kind of call someone to bring everything to you. Call someone to pass you the remote. Yeah, we're getting lazy, aren't we? And
it's a real problem. And I mean, I'll be giving a TEDx talk.
Yes.
In the very near future. And
I was about to ask you, because we've gone over the hour. I wanted to ask you about the TED talk and just one or two other questions.
Sorry. Yes, I mean, I think a lot of what we've said during this conversation are alluding to some of the points that I'll be making. You know, there's an over-reliance on the chair. There's an over-reliance on technology to ensure that we're more, the convenience is probably the most important aspect of modern life that we kind of cherish. And so by avoiding convenience, we'll actually become more resilient, stronger, and healthier, you know. And it's not just about movement. It's pretty much all areas of our lifestyle, you know. If we did that, if we said, you know what, I'm actually going to take the more difficult route. You know, I'm not going to grab that candy bar, chocolate bar from the petrol station when I walk past. I'm going to wait till I get home and actually I may not even really need that snack. You know, I'm going to wait till I get home and prepare something, or, you know, so just making that more difficult option for us, I believe is, you know, usually a healthier one. So my TED talk is going to cover that.
What's it called? What's it going to be called?
It's going to be called, it hasn't even been finalized yet, but pretty much it's likely to be Why Working Out Isn't Working Out.
Ooh.
So love it. You heard it here first. But yeah, I think that's going to be title. That's the one that kind of is making me feel that's something that I would want to click if I saw it online. I'm like, oh, that sounds quite interesting.
That's quirky, and it sparks curiosity straight away. I love it. And I love the idea of, by the way, not taking the easy option. I've run up escalators or I run upstairs when I'm in the underground. In fact, even since your talk, I've been doing it even more. I always walk up and I always walk down escalators. I'm in London. Now I don't even take the escalators. I'm just running up the stairs. And you kind of reminded me of it's just that little extra bit every time is good, isn't it? You get to the top and your thighs are burning like,
Oh, yeah. It never feels... I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And trust me, it never gets easier. I never ever say to myself, oh, I'm so fit now because now I can run up these flight of stairs and it doesn't feel like I did anything at all. I'm always regretting my decision, usually by 2/3 of the way up, 80% of the way up. I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, this is quite tough. But hey, like you say, you get to the top and you're like, boom, you know, it feels great. You get that endorphin rush. You feel great. The fact that you're the only one probably who's done that, and you've got 100+ people who are just standing on I mean, they can't even walk up the escalators. The majority of people just stand there waiting to be shuttled up to the top.
I can't do that. I cannot do that. It's painful. You know, it's like,
yeah. I mean, if you can, I mean, of course, there's some people who, of course, that they would struggle to walk the stairs or to run the stairs. But if you can, then I think you should. And there may be a time in my lifetime that I may not be able to walk the stairs. So whilst I can, I'm like, I'm going to do it. You know, I'm like, yeah, I can do this now. I'm going to do this for as long as I can. And by doing it, I'm more likely to be able to continue to do it for a longer period of time. That you know, that makes sense to me.
Totally. I think that's brilliant. What would you say, just a very quick flash question, what would you say is more important to your health, food or movement?
Well, I'm sure the listeners already know the answer. My answer to that, it would be movement. Yeah. So for two key reasons. First is looking at our ancestry, look at our evolution. If we didn't move in a particular way, with a particular ability, particular functional capability, we wouldn't actually have any food. That's it, right? Yeah. So movement had to be prioritized from an evolutionary point of view. Everything we do to obtain food is through movement. A baby's ability to find its mother's breast. Do you know what I mean? Like to move, to be able to suckle on the breast and obtain. That's movement right there. Most important, primary importance. Of course, food is very, very important. Don't want to don't want to diminish its role, but movement, I would say, is more so. And the evidence in terms of the scientific literature, movement is all over the literature in terms of its benefits for mind and body, and pretty much undisputed as well, which is I think is also important.
And to that,
yeah.
And to that point, you do have on your website, you've got this literature, haven't you? You've got the statistics, you've got the studies, you've got this.
Yes, yeah. So I have a section on my website called Movement is Medicine, which you can access by primalplay.com/research. And it has a lot of citations. There would be a lot more, as and when I get the time. Yeah. But I have a really nice summary video of all of the parts of the human body and the brain that benefit from movement with those citations. So people can just get down the rabbit hole.
Love it, love it. Just on the brain bit, I'm just trying to bring this in because I realize your time is, running out. We're both kind of running out.
Yeah.
One of the most important things about movement is it increases BDNF and neurogenesis. So neurogenesis is the creation of new brain cells. Yes. We used to think we had limited number of brain cells. We now know we're developing them every single day. And the more we move, the more we stimulate neurogenesis, which is the creation of new brain cells. And BDNF is being linked to how smart we are. It's our own intelligence. That's a brain-derived neurotropic factor, I believe it is.
That's exactly. That is correct. Yeah, and movement is one of the only proven ways to increase that. So lots of people are trying to hack that, but movement is actually the only way, significantly evidenced way of increasing BDNF, of neurogenesis, and also neuroplasticity. So the ability for the brain to rewire itself, for the synapses to be connected, for neurons to connect, are based on BDNF and other factors as well. So again, there's just so much compelling evidence as to why movement is important. It reduces the likelihood of depression. It reduces the likelihood of early onset of dementia. It reduces the likelihood of cognitive decline. It's better. It helps you with academic performance as a kid. It helps you with work performance as an adult. I mean, there is pretty much isn't anything that I can think of in the human body that doesn't benefit from being less sedentary.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally with that. And I think you've already answered it. What is your number one vitality secret?
Actually, my number one is probably something that you're not going to expect. The number one would be to never stop questioning. So for example, I've mentioned I've thrown out a lot of stats, a lot of information, and it all could be bogus. I mean, I could just be talking about opinion. I could be paraphrasing stuff that I didn't really understand. So I would implore anyone to double check, have a look at my website, have a look at the resources, and keep an open mind, and formulate your own opinion. So if you're spending time listening to this and you believe that some of this resonates, just make sure that it's something that you can apply to your own lives. Einstein famously said a couple of things that I will never forget. One is that play is the highest form of research. That's the first. And the reason why he said play is the highest form of research is because that creativity, that thirst for learning more about the world around you, it best comes when you're playful. Best comes when you decide, I'm not going to close myself off to ideas. I know it all. I know everything. I'm just going to work really hard. When you decide to actually be curious and excited about an area is when you take on board more information. The second thing he said was to never stop questioning. And I think that's just so important. The amount of times I've led myself into dead ends because I believed, I know it all now. No one can tell me anything about this. Anyone tells me something contrarian, I'll just ignore them because they're idiots. I'm the one who's well informed. And if you're aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is basically saying those who are true experts will admit that they know nothing. Those who are beginners will also say that they know nothing because they're willing to learn. Those with a little bit of knowledge will say that they're the experts. And so you never want to ever believe that you're an expert. You want to be as far to the right as possible, i.e., I'm an expert who knows the most there is on this subject, but I also realize that I know nothing about it because there's far more to this subject than I could ever imagine. And that's the healthiest way for us to be. We'll be less neurotic, less dogmatic, and more willing to embrace ideas that may challenge us, but we recognize that actually this is going to be beneficial for me. So there you go. That's my final point.
That really resonated. Thank you. That's brilliant. Darryl Edwards, it's been brilliant talking with you. Thank you so much for your contribution, for your time. Where can our viewers and listeners find you?
Best place is probably primalplay.com. If you want to find out a bit more about my philosophy in written form, then the Animal Moves book is the best version of that. It was released in April last year. #1 bestseller in many categories on Amazon, in the US and in the UK. And if you really want to get on board with kind of playing a bit more, I recently released something called the Animal Moves Fitness Deck, which is like a set of fitness cards. That's actually my business card.
Oh no, it's a business card.
Great, yeah. So yeah, it's on the other side. But yeah, so I've got a set of fitness cards, which basically randomizes your workouts or playouts, as I call them.
Oh, nice.
If you want to get me on social media, I'm known as @FitnessExplorer on Twitter and Instagram. And if you search for Darryl Edwards, DARRYL Edwards on Google, you'll find me.
Very good, very good. And finally, again, your TED Talk, when is it?
It's actually going to be the 26th of January. So I've got just over a week from this recording. And I'm not quite nail biting, but still got quite a bit of prep to do. And then I'm looking forward to getting everyone involved in the messaging, in the message, and getting people to see the world differently and how they can view exercise and movement in a different way. So I'm looking forward to it. Nervous anticipation.
I bet. Where are you actually doing it?
It's in Tunbridge Wells. So the details, for people who want to know, if you go to my website, primalplay.com, all the details are there. I think it's the latest post. If you go look under the events section of my website, then you'll get access to that.
Excellent. Superb. Thank you, Darryl. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. So
thank you.
Well, looking forward to hearing about your TED Talk.
Thank you very much. I'll definitely forward it on to you, Neil, and let's share it. Let's share that message with the world. That's the whole point of that process. So thanks so much for the conversation. I know it took a little bit longer than expected, but you've just been a pleasure to chat to, mate.
No, likewise. I think probably talk for another day. Michael Cordova from the event that said hi. He's the guy with Floating Point.
Oh, yeah. Likewise. I think I need to give him a shout actually, but yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. Thank you, Darryl. I'm going to end the broadcast. Stay online. Thank you for listening to the Vitality Secret podcast. If you liked this, please leave a 5-star rating. And if you loved it, please take a few minutes to leave a review. The more ratings and reviews that are left, the easier it is for this life-changing information to get into the hands of people who need it. Take your vitality to the next level at vitalitysecret.com.